Amen. You're live.
Whatever. My finger went over the camera. That's all. Good thing I can edit. Good thing I can edit.
Okay.
Unscrew the knot and push the hand in there.
Boom. Close by him and okay.
There you go. Good thing I can cut all that out.
Okay.
Father, we thank you for this opportunity, and God, we give you praise, we give you glory, we give you honor. God, we thank you for preparation, thank you for still minds. We declare peace now in Jesus' name. Father, I thank you for thinking through my mind, speaking into my heart, speaking through my lips. A word that will change our lives and make a mark in our lives forever that can never, ever be erased. It's by your will, by your might, and by your power, God, that we're able to do any and everything. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Colossians, we're going to go there. We're going to go to Colossians 1:16. So,
Cool. Okay.
okay.
No, I got it.
I'm easily distracted. All right. Hebrews chapter 1 from the New King James Version says this. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. It's the evidence of things not seen. So I want to read this a little differently. So let me read it to you this way. Faith is the tangible material of things we hope for and the confidence that we have it already. So faith is that thing, that force, that material thing that produces whatever desire we have, produces whatever we want from God. It's faith that's going to produce that. If we look down at verse 2 in that chapter, we'll see where it talked about through faith, the patriarchs were developed. The patriarchs walked through faith. Everything they accomplished through faith. But I just want to stay right here with this one definition. So if faith is that material piece, for instance, we have a table. This table just didn't automatically get here. It just didn't, somebody just didn't say, okay, I want a table, and go pick up a table. First of all, this table had to grow. It took years for this table to grow. This table first had to become a tree. Once it became a tree and the tree was ready to be cut down and turned into what they got in here. They got slates in here. And be turned into slates. Then the tree was chopped down. It went to the mill. It went through the process of preparing. Then it went and they cut it up to get the particular size slates that they wanted. And then they began to put the table together. But the key is the table was already there. It was in the tree. We just didn't know it was a table in the tree. We just saw a tree. So faith is pretty much the same way. Faith says the promises of God are already there in your life. You just have to use that one thing. You just have to use that faith that God has given you to tap into those promises. Hold on to them and never let them go. Remember last week, the last time we met, I made the statement that when you start stepping out in faith, people are going to laugh. They're going to talk. They're going to say you done lost your mind because you're believing to do something that you've never done, that they never done, they never seen anybody else do. They've never seen anybody do it the way you're doing. Even if they saw someone else with it or saw someone else do it, they're not doing it the way you're doing it. So that's why I like to tell people sometimes it's best not to tell people what you're doing and just let them watch. Because I promise you, they're watching. They're watching everything you do, everything you say, every step, especially when you tell them you're a Christian. They're watching you because they're going to see, okay, you're going to mess up. Yeah, you ain't as saved as you think you are. You ain't as saved. You ain't living right. But the key is to stay the course. That's the key. Faith only works when you stay the course. James talks about our faith being tried. Our faith has to be tried. And we're going to talk about that next week. But if we stick to this definition, it says faith is the substance, that tangible thing that we cannot see that will produce what we're believing God for. That's what the New King James, that's how the New King James says it. Now, let's take a look at how the Amplified says it. The Amplified says it this way. Now, faith is the assurance, the confirmation, the title deed of things hoped for, being the proof of things not seen and the conviction of their reality. So here the Amplified gives us three definitions of faith. It says it's the assurance. Then it says it's the confirmation. Then it says it's the title deed. All three of those definitions represent something that is tangible, solid, by law, that says what your promise, what you're believing God for, it belongs to you. It is yours. No one else can have it. It's yours. So I like to use this analogy when I'm explaining or talking about the definition of faith. Let's talk about a house. You buy a house. You pay it off. You get the title deed in hand. Everything's going along smooth and steady. 6 months later, you get a letter in the mail from the bank that says your house has now been put in repossession status. And they're coming out to pick up the keys, put a lock on the door, and you're gonna have to move out. Well, that's going to create a problem because first thing I promise you, the first thing you're gonna do, you're gonna pick up the phone, you're gonna call the bank, and you're gonna tell the bank off. That's the first thing you're gonna do because you got the title deed in your hand. It's signed, sealed, delivered, stamped, notarized, however you want to put it. It's a done deal. The property is now yours. But 6 months later, the bank comes in and says, okay, the house is in repossession. You didn't pay off the note and you didn't do this. Here's what I suggest to you. That title deed says that I don't care what the bank says, this is my house. I can go to any court in the land. The bank can say whatever they want to say in the court. But as long as I have this title deed signed by the bank with my signature on it, stamped, there is nothing the court can do. All the court can say is, hey, you signed it, you stamped it, you put your seal on it, so this house belongs to them. You got to recoup whatever you're trying to recoup because you gave it to them. But the whole time, you've already paid the house off. The mistake is not yours. The mistake is on the bank side. So as long as you have a title deed, there's no reason for you to call the bank and trip. All you need to do is walk down, don't walk. Please don't walk. Drive to the bank, politely get out of the car, talk to the banker and say, hey, this letter came. Can you explain this letter? And I promise you, when they look at that letter and they pull it up on the computer, because you have a title deed in your hand, it's going to come up on their computer that you have a title deed. And they're not going to be able to explain that letter unless they say, okay, it was a computer error, it was a computer generated letter, so disregard it. But I still wouldn't leave at that point because then I say, well, no, this is the letter, but this is the title deed, and this is a copy of this title deed because I will never put this title in their hands. That's what faith says. Faith says you have this title deed that belongs to you to tap into the promises of God. And when you tap into the promises of God, that title deed is for whatever promise you're believing God for. I don't care if it's wealth. I don't care if it's a house, a car. I don't care what it's for. Whatever promise God has made you, faith is that title deed. As long as you're holding on to that title deed and you are convinced, fully persuaded, beyond the shadow of a doubt that you know this is mine. I may not see it right now, but I know it's mine. I remember, I'll give you a real good illustration. The last two cars I had, before I ever stepped in those cars, I saw myself driving. I saw them parked in my driveway. I saw them parked in front of my job. Wherever I went, I saw myself in each of those cars. So when the time came to get the car, I wasn't shocked. I wasn't surprised. I just knew, okay, you can say what you want to say, you do. I don't care how you work the numbers out, but it's going to work in my favor. The car is mine. You might as well go and sign the paperwork, give me the keys, and everything be everything. Even to the point, one of the cars, the bank literally, it's interesting the way God does it. So the second car, and I'm going on a rabbit trail, so I can tell you the whole story. The second car, I started believing for 3 months before I paid off the first one. And when I got the first one paid off, I'll say about a month after it was paid off, the bank sent a repo man to my house at 3 o'clock in the morning to repo my car. I got up like nothing was wrong, went outside. My car was missing. So at first I said, well, one of the boys that took the car and then had a wreck and didn't want to wake me up. Then I asked them, they say, nope, we didn't take the car. So I called the police. Police say, nope, it wasn't stolen, sir. It's been repoed. You need to call such and such and such. So I called the bank, and the bank say, yeah, you hadn't made a payment for 3 months. I'm like, no, it's paid off. I got the title deed. And they wanted to go through this long, drawn-out process. I was like, no, that's okay. Guess what? You can keep that car. I got the title deed. You can't sell it because I got the deed. There's nothing you can do with it. You're not getting another penny from me. I got a phone call 2 weeks later from a dealership that said, okay, you've been looking at trucks. I got a truck here I want you to come look at. This is the honest to God's truth. I went to this car lot. It was about, what time we got there? 7 o'clock? Mm-hmm. It was about 7 o'clock at night. This man put me in this truck. The truck swallowed me. It's the same truck I had driven, the same exact truck I had driven before that made me want that truck. But this truck literally swallowed me. I looked like a midget in this front seat. And he had me test drive, and I'm like, I was so uncomfortable. He said, what you think? I said, Now this one, he said, well, I got something I think you'll like. He pulled this baby blue Chrysler 300, the car I had started believing for 3 months earlier. He pulled it up and he said, let's test drive. I said, we got to test drive that. Let's just get paperwork done. But the people with me said, no, let's test drive. So we test drove. I was cool and fine. We went in, everything went according to plan. Why? All because I had a title deed to a promise from God that said I could have any car, any vehicle I wanted, as long as I did it by faith. I think for me, one of the greatest things God, I won't say great, I can't say that. I can say the amazing thing. One of the amazing things God has done in my life is tell me that everything I do has to be done by faith. And I'm here to tell you it was not an easy road. It was not easy at all. There was ups, there was downs, there was struggles. There were times I missed it. There were times I fell on my face. There were times I told God, you know what you can do with this. But in the end, I began to understand that as long as I have this title deed, there is nothing standing in my way but me. This title deed alone allows me to do what God has called me to do and to tap into those promises that God has already prepared for me before I was ever born. That's the thing about this title deed. This title deed is, you can equal it or make it equivalent to your birthright. Your birthright says whatever your parents have after they dead and gone, no disrespect, but after they're dead and gone, that's yours. Whether you want it or not, is yours. What you do with it, that's up to you. That's what that title deed says. That title deed, faith being that title deed says, because of the blood that Jesus bled on the cross, because he died, he rose again just for me. I have a title deed to everything the cross represents. Everything, every promise, everything God's ever given me, I have a right to it. That's what the title deed is. Then the Amplified says, it's the confirmation and the assurance. Assurance says, there's no if, and, buts about it. That's all assurance means. There's no if, and, buts about it. It is what it is. If it's 12 o'clock midnight, it's dark outside. You're not going to change that. If it's 12 o'clock midnight and it's not dark outside, start praying because you missed the rapture. That's all I can tell you. Assurance says that it is going to happen. That's all assurance is. The confirmation, when you talk about faith as a confirmation, that's the tricky part. That's the part that's sometimes hard to understand. Because when we think of confirmation, we think of, okay, somebody's backing me up. Somebody's standing behind me that can support me. Well, that's faith. Faith is the same way because when you're standing on faith, there are three things you're going to do. You're going to believe God. Well, let me give it to you in order. First, you're going to find the promise. Then you're going to believe God. Then you're going to follow the instructions God gives you on that promise. Well, while you're doing all three of those, all of heaven is standing behind you, making sure that promise is headed in your direction. The Bible says Daniel prayed 21 days, and we talked about Daniel. The Bible says Daniel prayed 21 days before the answer to his prayer showed up. But in those 21 days, from day one that he prayed, the angels and all of heaven sent his answer to him. It just got held up. But Daniel stayed fast to his prayer. He believed God. So when that 21st day hit and his answer showed up, he didn't flake out because he still stood in faith, knowing that I got people working on my behalf. I got all of heaven working on my behalf to make sure that this promise manifests in my life. Then the Amplified says this: being the proof of things we do not see. Being the proof of things we do not see and the conviction of their reality. Listen, here's the thing. Here's the tough thing about faith. If you're one of those people that for years said that if I see it, I'll believe it. If you see it and you're going to believe it, you're going to have some problems. Remember this story. After Jesus died, buried, rose again, went to heaven and came back. And he met with the 12 disciples in the room. And when he walked through the wall, Thomas wasn't there. So when they went and told Thomas that Jesus had arisen, Thomas said, unless I put my finger in the hole in his hand, my hand in the hole in his side, I'm not believing. So when Jesus and Thomas meet, first thing Jesus says, put your finger in this hole. Now put your hand in this hole in my side. You're blessed, Thomas, because you believe. But those who believe without doing what you did, they're even more blessed because they believe by faith. Here's what you need to understand when you're one of those people that I see it, so I believe it. Your faith will never work that way. You're going to struggle. You're going to struggle and struggle if you're saying, okay, I get paid Friday. So I'm believing God I get paid Friday. Why you believing God to get paid Friday when you know you get paid Friday? That's not faith. Faith is believing God for something you do not have, that He said you could have, and that He promised it was yours. That's what faith is. We have to come to a point that when we start believing God for the promises, that we become confident that His word is true and His promises are yes, and I can't have it. I have it. I like to say it this way, and I can't wait till we get into the area of manifesting our faith. Because when I start teaching you how to manifest your faith and how to bring your faith into your reality, it's awesome. It's so simple. It took me years to master a simple point till I was ready to bang my head up against a wall. But all I want to do is just look at the definition of that. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Okay, let's read it from the Passion Translation. The Passion Translation says it this way. And if you are new to studying the Word of God, I recommend you have a Passion Translation, but you also have a Living Bible or NIV alongside it, because the Passion Bible only comes in the New Testament. But anyway, that's just a side note. The Passion Bible says, now faith brings our hopes into reality and becomes the foundation needed to acquire the things we long for. It is all the evidence required to prove what is still unseen. Here we go again. We keep hearing this thing about faith deals with that thing that's unseen. Well, if you're believing God for that dream home, you're not in that dream home. And if you're anything like me, you got it sketched out on a piece of paper somewhere, and you see the picture, but you don't see the physical house. There's a difference between seeing the picture and the physical house. There's a huge difference. But because you don't see the physical house does not mean that that dream home is not yours. Here's what the picture does. The picture creates a picture on the canvas of your imagination. So the more you look at that picture, you begin to develop a physical house in your spirit. So in your spirit, you're seeing this house. You begin to see every room in that house. You begin to see the color on the walls. You begin to see the carpet, how the furniture's laid out, where the doors are. It becomes so real to you that when you walk in your home, your present home, you don't see your present home. You begin to see your dream home. That's seeing the unseen. That's the unseen piece that faith allows you to see. When you get to that point and you get to that stage, and faith has developed that in your spirit, and you hold on to that, you now have created a title deed. You have created the confirmation, the assurance, and now you have the conviction that I can do this. I can do this. One of my strengths is I don't like quitting. I never quit. I don't let anything beat me. It may take me 3 days, but I'm gonna keep at you, and I'm gonna keep at you, and I'm gonna keep at you till I figure you out. Well, it's also one of my weaknesses because I'll stay up all night. I just won't let it go till I figure it out. Well, that's the same attitude we need to have with our faith. We need to have that attitude, that bulldog mentality of, I got it in the grasp of my jaws and I'm not letting it go. Or it's, what illustration can I do, God? Help us see this. It's like being in a storm and you know, okay, there's water coming. But if I can get to the top of this hill and I can tie myself to this tree, I'll be okay. I'm gonna get wet. I'm gonna have some scratches. I may have some bruises, but I'll live. Well, that's the same way. We have to become so dogmatic about a promise that we're believing God for that we're not listening to people talk negative about what we're believing God for. We're not listening to people talk about, well, you can't do this, you can't. No, I ain't got time for that. I have developed in myself the ability to stand there and look at people talk and I not hear one word they say. When you're telling me something that I'm believing God for and you're telling me I can't do this, I can't have this, that I'm not there yet. No, I don't need to hear that, but I'll stand there politely and I'll let you talk, but I not hear you. And in my head, I'm like, keep watching, keep looking, it's coming. Keep watching, keep looking. Why? Because I'm standing on my faith because I got the promise from God that I can do this. So faith is that reality of what we're believing God for. It's that conviction that what I'm believing God for, I already have. Now, the New Living Translation says this: faith shows the reality of what we hope for. Faith shows the reality of what we hope for. I like that statement because of this. Here it is. Remember, faith is believing God for that unseen peace that has not manifested in your realm or in your physical realm yet. So the Living Bible says faith now, it's that reality, and it's going to show you that it's yours. Meaning, if I keep believing God, in spite of all the odds, if I keep believing God and I keep following the instructions that He gives me, I'm going to see my faith manifest. It will become a reality. Not only will I see it, but everyone around me is going to see it. And that's the thing. When everyone around you begins to see you living by faith and how the promises of God are manifesting in your life, you'll be surprised when they start coming. How you did that? Tell me how to do that. Tell me how to get that. Faith is one of those things that people want, but because they can't get past the process part. That's the word I'm looking for. Because they can't get past the process of faith. Because faith is a process. There are times, however, that you put your faith out there that God will do the suddenly. But for the most part, there's a process that you're going to have to go through because God's got to work some things out in you. He's got to move some people around
to help you do what you're believing for, or move some people around to even give you what you believe in for. Because God only works through man now. He's God. He can do whatever he wants to do. All he requires you to do is to believe on him. Believe in the promise. Believe what he said is true. And watch the promise come and manifest in your life where you can put your hands on it. You can hit it if you want. You can kiss it if you want. And if it's not big enough, where you cannot hug it, you can hug it if you want. That's what faith does. Faith brings it into your realm of reality. It brings you into that place where you can put your hands on it. The Phillips translation says it this way. Faith means putting our full confidence in the things we hope for. Putting our full confidence in the thing we hope for. Here's my illustration of this. You graduated high school. You said you were going to college because everybody else said they were going to college. So you went to college. Your heart wasn't a bit more in college. Your mind wasn't on college. You just went because everybody else went. Here you are, a sophomore. You still don't have a major. Get ready to be a junior. You still don't have a major. So when you get to your senior year, you just decide, I ain't doing this no more. I'm done. That's what happens when you don't have confidence in the promises of God. We start out strong believing God, but then when the wind starts blowing, we start getting flaky. Then when we start hitting roadblocks, we start making excuses. Well, maybe this ain't for me. Maybe God's telling me no. I'm telling you, hear me, please hear me. When you start believing God and you start operating in faith, you are going to have to walk through some windstorms, some rainstorms. You got to hit some walls, but you cannot stop. The devil's going to throw everything he can at you to get you to stop believing for that promise. Because when that promise manifests in your life, it shoots you to a new place in God. And it shoots you to a new level in God. That where the enemy thought he had you, he no longer has control over you. It helps develop confidence in your life. Let's look at it from the Message translation. Message translation says this. The fundamental fact of existence is that this trust in God, this faith, so he clarifies faith as trusting in God, is the firm foundation under everything that makes life worth living. It's our handle on what we can't see. Okay, first of all, he says this. First of all, the Message translation says, faith is trusting God. That's the first thing he says. Then he comes back and he says, it's the firm foundation under everything that makes our life worth living. The firm foundation on everything that makes our life worth living. That's what faith is. That's what faith does for us. It's that thing that we build on that makes our life worth living. Then he goes on to say, it's our handle on what we cannot see. So there it is again. Faith is that thing that we can't see, but it's the material and the title deed that says, though you don't see it and I can't see it, that does not mean it's not mine. I'm believing God for it, and all you have to do is just keep watching. Don't say nothing against what I'm believing. Don't say nothing negative to me. Just keep watching. And when it manifests, we're going to throw a party. We're going to shout. We're going to scream. We're going to praise God because it happened. Now, I am at a point in my life where when I'm believing God for something, soon as it show up, I'm on to the next thing. That's how we go from faith to faith to faith. I have learned, and you have to learn and you have to develop yourself to where you begin to get your faith to become perpetual. Meaning, you believe God for this thing. When that thing comes, you move on to the next thing. You don't give faith a break. You keep using your faith. Because here's what happens. You believe God for a thing, that thing comes, you don't use your faith anymore. Well, you got to go all the way back and you got to start all the way back over from the beginning. But you use your faith for the promise of God, it came. You went to the next thing, that came. You went to the next thing, that came. You went to the next thing, that came. Now you're developing a system in your life where faith works. So all I got to do, believe God, follow the instructions, stick to the plan. It's coming. And what you'll discover is that though you may start out small, every step, every next move of faith, it gets bigger, it gets bigger, it gets bigger and bigger, and it does not stop. Trust me, I'm here to tell you, it does not stop. I think it was last week I asked God, Lord, am I believing for too much? Is this thing too big? And all God said was, it ain't too big for me. So I was like, okay, if it ain't too big for you, then we good. Let's keep going. This is it. I am currently putting my faith to work in an area I have never put my faith to work before. And when this happens, don't talk to me about what I can't do no more. Don't tell me what can't happen in my life no more. Because I've already developed a confidence, but this is going to put me in position to where I know now in whom I have believed. I know it. And all I have to do is stick to the plan. Follow the plan. Stick to the plan. Follow the plan. Stay the course, Dwayne. Follow the plan. You're tired. I don't care. Stay the course, Dwayne. Follow the plan. Don't look like it's going to happen. Don't care. Stay the course. Follow the plan. Stop paying attention to what your natural eyes see in the natural when you're using your faith. And keep your eye on what you're believing God for. That's the key. Because your natural eyes will tell you all the time, you can't do this. That's not going to happen. But if you keep your eyes on the promise that you're believing God for, you will be able, you might have to crawl through, you might have to pull your way through, but I promise you will get through the other side. You will come out on the other side and your promise will manifest. And you'll look back and say, God did this. It was nothing I could have done. God did this. Let's take a look at this last verse. I know I'm over, but let's take a look at this last verse. Colossians 1:16 is just one part I want you to see in this, because we're talking about how faith is invisible. Listen to what Paul wrote in Colossians 1:16. For by him, being God, all things were created that are in heaven and that are on the earth, that are visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created through him, being God, and for him. Whether we can see it or not does not mean it does not exist. You can't see the dirt on the moon, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You can't see moon rocks rocks from the moon unless you go to a museum. So they are there. They are there. Does not mean they don't exist. You can't see underground streams. but you know they exist. So just because you can't see something does not mean you cannot have it. That's why I love the scripture in I think that's 2 Corinthians 5:7. For we walk by faith, not by sight. Because the things that are seen, they're temporary, but the things that are not seen, they last forever and forever and forever. So just because you can't see it, just because you can't see it, doesn't mean you can't have it. All you have to do is get the confidence, the title deed, the assurance that what you believe in God for, it's all yours. And I promise you, you will not be disappointed. Your faith will work. So join us next week as we talk about the trying parts of faith, how your faith has to be tried and tested. So until next time, remember, Jesus is Lord. Hit the middle of the screen. You and YouTube, so I can cut all this out.
Okay.
Where is it? There you go. This blew up. That's why you see it.